So if you've been around church world for very long, then you know that one of the gravitational pulls over time is that a church eventually becomes, maybe they start out with the best intentions, but over time it becomes about the people that are already there. And the mission of Real Life has been to help people find and follow Jesus for a very long time. What was it that kept that at the center of Real Life's focus? How did what maybe even did you have to fight against to make sure that that remained the focus so that it didn't become about the people that are already here?
I kept going back to the early days of Real Life where even before they started the church, they went door to door and asked people two questions. First one was, do you attend a church? If they said yes, they said, great, God bless you, and moved on. If they said no, they said, what kind of church would you attend? And overwhelmingly, the answers were one of three things: real, relational, relevant. So the idea from the very beginning was we want to be a place that's authentic and real and relevant, relational for somebody that's never been to church before. And it was constantly saying, what would you bring your unchurched friend to? And that question kept us coming up with ideas like, let's do Christmas concerts. Let's do crazy things for Halloween that cause people to bring their friends to. And let's don't call it Hallelujah Carnival. Let's call it the Halloween party, just to keep the focus on who's the friend in your life that would never go to church, but would come to this. And that caused some difficult decisions. And we lost some people that I love deeply, but they decided we weren't for them anymore. But we were going to be okay with that because I kept seeing the hundreds of people that would get baptized every Easter. When you just take seasons of ministry and sow seeds through parties and fun and serving, and then when you reap the harvest through a baptism service, it's why you do what you do.
Sometimes churches are really good at answering questions that people aren't asking. If they come in, it's like, that had nothing to do with my day-to-day life.
Right.
That's not gonna help me on Tuesday at all.
Right.
So what are some of the questions that you feel like a lot of our people, our neighbors, our baristas, our classmates, that they're asking that you wanted Real Life to be able to answer?
I think the big one for everybody was, and still is God for me? And that's, you can kind of say that one of two ways. Is this God thing even for me? But then, is God for me? And we kept wanting to share with people, man, there's a God that loves you and died for you and wants to have a relationship with you. And it came back to that issue of hope, that there really is hope for everyone.
All right, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to Real Life. My name is Jake, and I get to be on the team here. And I want to say welcome to week 2 of this message series called 25, where we are celebrating the first 25 years of life here at Real Life Church, but then also optimistically looking forward to the next 25 and seeing what God is going to do next. And over the next few weeks, we're working through the values of this church. And honestly, it's why I believe that when you showed up, you feel like you could call this place home. Now, if you were with us last week, you were invited to participate in our birthday gift that we're not giving ourselves, but one that we're giving away. And specifically, we want to give away the single largest one-time gift that we have ever given. And so on Monday, October 27th, you and I have the opportunity to work one day to feed the world. The math is really simple. All you do is take your salary, or what you would earn in a year, divide it by 365, and that represents what you make in one day. And if every single one of us gives one day's wage, we can make a big difference. Now, our primary goal in this is 100% participation. And no matter who you are or how much you make, you can give one day's wage. But then also, our secondary goal is to feed 2,500 children for an entire year. For most of us, worrying about where our next meal is going to come from is simply theoretical. We would have to imagine. We've never experienced it. But for too many kids in this world, it is a daily reality. And you and I, we can eliminate that fear together. We are partnering with a group called Convoy of Hope, which feeds kids all over the world. And today, I want you to hear from one of the recipients of this kind of generosity. Today, I'd like for you to meet Joseph.
I live with my mom, auntie, and uncle, and my two sisters. We don't eat sometimes in the morning. I would find going to school without anything to eat. Reading would be hard. Thinking about eating, it hurts pretty bad. My mom would have to be the one who's struggling to find money for us to eat, to find shelter, clothes, school. We found out that every time we come to school, we would get some food. We wouldn't even want to stop going to school because we know at school we are going to find food, we are going to eat, we are going to be healthy. The food is very delicious because I even thank the people who are cooking it. If it wasn't for their cooking or what we eat, I wouldn't be even healthier. Yeah, my studies have gotten better. I know if I do concentrate on school, I will help my mom.
I need them to finish their education, have a better job, and have a good life. Yeah, it's giving me hope. I don't want my kids to pass through what I'm passing through, but I'm proud of them. I'm telling you, I'm proud of them.
I want to be a businessman. Yeah, working in a company or that, and owning my own company. Building a house for my mom, helping everyone. Yeah, like you are helping us. I also pray to help others as well, following your footsteps.
You know, Convoy of Hope, they say that they believe that every child deserves to live in a hunger-free world, and we wholeheartedly agree. And so if you can participate with our family and bring one day's wage there on Monday, October 27th, we know it can make a big, big difference. If we've learned anything in the first 25 years, it's that when goals like this are put in front of this church, you go above and beyond, and we can't wait to celebrate. And so when you're ready to give your one-day gift, you can do so on our app, on our website, or here on campus. If you're giving in person, just write one day on that envelope, and we will go to make sure that those kids receive your generosity in the name of Jesus. Can't wait to celebrate together. Again, this message series is called 25 because this month Real Life is turning 25, and that means the very first time we gathered as a church was in the year 2000. And in the year 2000, I was 17 years old, and I was a junior in high school, which to some of you makes me sound very young, and to some of you makes me sound very old, which means I'm right in the middle. And what is undeniable is that being a high school student in the year 2000 is very different than it is today. For instance, when it comes time to discover new music, back in our day, you had to burn a CD with a playlist of your favorite songs you wanted to share with your friends. And that playlist contained songs that you definitely legally purchased and definitely did not illegally download from Napster. But today, you just make a playlist and text it to your friends to Spotify, no big deal. Back in 2000, there was this thing called must-see TV, where you would make an appointment to be on your couch to watch a show at a specific time, because if you missed that episode, you were left out of the conversation the next day. And today, you can watch an entire season in one day on Netflix. Back in that day, honestly, we were not having very many conversations about things like mental health or pursuing therapy. And today, words like anxiety and depression and pursuing the help that we need, it's become common language. Back in 2000, the drills we were doing at school were to help us survive fires and earthquakes. And today, I get emails that my kids are going to participate in an active shooter drill. Back in the day, our body image was shaped by magazines and MTV, and today it's by social media filters and influencers. It is undeniable that the adolescents' experience today is way different than their parents' or grandparents' generation. Research shows that being a young adult today is really different than it was 25, 30 years ago. For instance, young adults today are more likely to have a 4-year college degree, more likely to have a full-time job. They are carrying way more student debt and are significantly less likely to be married and have kids. And on top of all that, our generation today, the kids and students, were the most affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. In critical years of social development and educational experiences, they were told to isolate for almost 2 full years, losing out on experiences that most of us got to have. I think it's going to take years for us to fully understand the impact that that had on us. I remember those days vividly because at that time, Trudy, my wife, she was teaching, and we had 3 kids in elementary school. And so when it came time to learn from home, we had to transform our garage into a 1-room schoolhouse with multiple desks and multiple devices. And one day I came home early and I found our third born, his name is Knox, and he was playing in the driveway and eating goldfish, but I knew he was supposed to be in class. And so I went up to him and I said, "Knox, dude, you're supposed to be on your device." He said, "Dad, it's cool. I made my Zoom background a picture of me so it looks like I'm there and she'll never know." He was 6 years old. I said, "Dude, I'm not on your side. You can't tell me those things. You have to go to school." And it was that day that we learned Knox will either lead people to Jesus or jail, but we're not totally sure yet. I'll let you know. So with all the cultural adjustments and the technology advancements and the COVID implications, it is undeniable that this generation has some unique challenges. And as we're working through our values of real life, this will always be true about us, is that we are going to value generational impact. We overinvest in the next generation like everything depends on it because it does. The church's future isn't someday, it's now. If you're new to real life, you need to know that we will always, and I mean always, prioritize kids and students. That if there ever comes a moment where we need to distribute resources, and it's a choice between whether those go to kids and students or to adults, the grown-ups are just going to have to figure it out, right? The kids are going to get priority. But on top of that, we will have a relentlessly positive view of the next generation here at Real Life. Throughout the decades, a generational sin has been that the old folks look at the young folks and roll their eyes. And they scoff and they say, "Why do you wear that? And why do you listen to that? And why do you act that way? And why do you believe those things?" And I just need you to know that will forever be out of bounds here at Real Life. We are going to believe in the next generation. We are going to be optimistic about the future, and we will stay in awe of the young women and young men that God is raising up around us. That is the way Real Life feels about kids and students. Now, the reason that that is true, it's not because I have a bunch of kids and it's a personal preference. It's because it's from the Bible. In fact, if you have a Bible or a Bible app, I'd love for you to join me in this New Testament book called Titus. It's Titus chapter 2, and it's a small New Testament book, almost halfway through, right between 2 Timothy and Philemon. And when you get there, you'll discover a letter written from a guy named Paul. He was an older church leader, and he was writing to his younger protege, Titus. And Titus needed some advice on how to lead a church, specifically a multi-generational church. What that meant was this church had grandparents and parents and kids all at the same place. And as you can imagine, leading a multi-generational church presents some challenges, like what music do you play? Because they don't all like the same stuff. And how loud is it? Do we have earplugs at the door? And what programs do we offer? And what values does everyone share? And so it could get a little complicated. But on top of that, after Paul gives some advice on how to navigate a multi-generational church, he is going to highlight something that every single one of us needs to know. He is going to tell us that in this life, there is exactly one motivation that ever truly changes someone. There is only one thing that will produce lifelong and sustainable change in your life and in the lives of other people. And even though we try a million other tactics, there's only one thing that will really work. So let's jump in. Titus chapter 2, verse 1. Here's how Paul begins. He says, "As for you, Titus, promote the kind of living that reflects wholesome teaching." I want to pause right there because here Paul correlates the messages that you and I receive and believe to be true with the way that we live. Specifically, he's saying what we believe shapes how we live. Some of us are doing this intentionally. We're choosing to filter the messages and choose the teaching we know is true. Others of us are doing this unintentionally, and we're just receiving everything that the world is throwing at us. But what teaching you and I receive to be true shapes the decisions that we make, and the relationships that we're in, and the priorities we create. One recent study showed that the average American adult interacts with media, spends more than 11 hours per day in some form of media interaction. 11 hours a day. That's social media, podcast, book, radio, TV. And if you thought the kids were the ones with the screen problem, the grown-ups aren't any better. And that means 77 hours a week we are receiving messages. And if we're not being intentional about the ones that we receive and reject, we'll believe just about anything. On top of that, if we're spending 77 hours of our week receiving stuff, and you're here for exactly 1 hour, that's a lopsided equation. And you're going to need to be intentional about what you pursue. You're going to need something more. Today, I want you to hear from one of our favorite people here at Real Life. She's one of our Real Life students, and she has discovered the life that God created her for and what the more that she needed. I'd love for you to meet Izzy.
I'm Izzy. I'm 16 years old, and I've been going to Real Life for 5 years. My whole life, I wasn't really going to church, and then in 7th grade, I got invited to come here. My neighbor invited me for the Easter service. I thought it was really cool because I got to pet like bunnies, and then I got to pet a chicken. When I first came, I feel like my relationship with God was kind of undecided at that moment because I didn't really know what I was walking into or the stuff that they were talking about in service. But I started coming to YX every week. YX is really fun, and that is just filled with like games, and we do a lot of after church events and like get-togethers. When we had small group, we got to talk about the service, and I got to ask a lot of questions, and my leader's name was Savannah. Savannah just helped me realize what a woman of God looks like and how I could apply the stuff I've learned into my life. She's just really always been there to answer any questions I had or any concerns. Anytime I'm having a hard day or just like a hard week, she would just call me and just ask like, hey, like how can I pray for you? Or can we grab a coffee? Like just talk about like what's going on in your life. I feel like having Savannah in my life is another support system that if I feel like I can't talk to like my mom or my dad about it, she's just been such a safe place for me. And throughout the hard seasons of my life, like I know I could always talk to her. Being a leader really is just being there, just showing up. Like you don't have to know the right answers. Being there is really what's the most important thing. I got baptized February 2nd, 2021. Even my leader has had an impact on that. Like she met up with me and got coffee and talked to me about like, what does it mean to be baptized? I just remember being like nervous, and the whole room just got so loud, and I felt so loved in that moment. I came here in 7th grade and I found that love and that space, and I now want to give back to the 7th graders. So now I volunteer with the 7th graders. I just really wanted girls to have the same type of support that I had in middle school. That's when I found God, when I found the faith, and just having someone to always be there for them, that I just wanted to be what Savannah gave to me. Just because you're young doesn't mean that you can't serve or be the hands and feet of Jesus. You still can, and the Bible calls you to do that. 1 Timothy 4:12 says, "Don't let anyone think less of you because you're young. Be an example to all believers in what you say, in the way you live, in the way you love, your faith and your purity." Go be an example of what God calls you to do. Go serve, go spread the love of God.
I'm so grateful that Izzy found a place here to where she could be led, and now she is leading. And what she found is that she needs more than just 1 hour a week. It's going to be important to understand that what we receive as true shapes the way that we live. Now, Paul goes on to give Titus some instruction on how to lead the different generations. Look at the advice. He says, teach the older men to exercise self-control, to be worthy of respect, and to live wisely. They must have sound faith and be filled with love and patience. Similarly, teach the older women to live in a way that honors God. They must not slander others or be heavy drinkers. Instead, they should teach others what is good. Now, this is a great opportunity to give you a principle that you can apply when you're reading the Bible on your own. And I so desperately hope you will. And the principle goes like this: the Bible was written for you, but not to you. Here's what that means, is that the Bible was written for your good. It was written so you would know Jesus and know who God is and have a relationship with him and know what it's like to be a part of a church. That was written for you. But it wasn't written directly to you, historically speaking. A lot of these things that you'll find in the Bible are letters written to specific groups of people at a specific time with a specific need. And so here in this church that Titus was leading, the older men specifically needed to hear that a life of self-control is what leads to respect. Just because you are older than someone does not mean you are more mature than that someone. Just because you are older than someone does not automatically give you a voice into their life. There has to be maturity that God can grow, and that happens through self-control. Self-control leads to respect. The older ladies in this church needed to hear to dial it down at happy hour and be more respectful to the people that weren't there to defend themselves. That was specific advice. But then he highlights this principle that is true of every single church, and that is the need for generational impact. Real life needs older women and men to intentionally invest in the thriving of our students and our kids. This has been the design of the church from the very beginning. But I want to issue a special challenge to one group of people here, and that is the men of real life. Guys, our kids and students desperately need you to step up and lead them. Throughout history, women have done a better job of responding to this responsibility, and we can make a long list as to why that might be, but it doesn't mean that men aren't needed. Guys, our kids and students need to see that a man can passionately love Jesus. They need to see that men can have fun and play games, but also love God's word and submit to King Jesus. So I'm hoping that for many of you, this will be a challenge today to take a step in that direction and watch how you get so much more out of it than you could ever give. So Paul here, he's giving them guidance on how to lead a multi-generational church. And then let's skip down to verses 11 and 12 where Paul writes, "For the grace of God has been revealed, bringing salvation to all people. We are instructed to turn from godless living and sinful pleasures. We should live in this evil world with wisdom, righteousness, and devotion to God." If I had to describe the evergreen concern of adults when it comes to the young people in their life, here's how I would summarize it. How can we get them to do the right thing and not the wrong thing? How do we get them to do the good things? And how do we get them to stop doing the bad things? If you're a more domineering or parent or a teacher, you might even say, how can I make them do the right things and not the wrong things? But that is my primary concern. If you've ever had a kid in your life, at any variety, you know it can be this emotional roller coaster of deep moments of scratching your head and then other moments of pride. I already introduced you to our son Knox, and he's an amazing kid. He loves real life, and he loves playing with his friends, and he's learning to play the drums, and he is great. And early on, he gave us a run for our money. He was the kid that took a tub of diaper cream and rubbed it all over his face. And then when he was caught, he just laughed about it. He was the kid that did a face plant in an ink pad and got it all over his skin. He is the kid that adopted an emotional support zucchini one day that he just found in the neighborhood. I think he stole it from someone's garden, and he would just carry it around with him. We found it in his bed at one point, and I was thinking, is he okay? All right, is he okay? I don't totally know. And then a couple years ago, on his own accord, without any pushing from mom and dad, he tried out for his school's production of The Little Mermaid, and he was cast as Seahorse number 2. Here was his costume, right? It's amazing. And as I'm sitting in the theater and I'm watching this elementary production of Little Mermaid, I'm having an emotional moment over Seahorse number 2, who had one line in the entire play, and it's because I'm so proud of him. And I'm trying to figure out, how do I have more seahorse moments and less zucchini moments? How do I have more do the right thing and less do the wrong thing? How do I make sure that they stay in school, don't do drugs? How do I make sure they come home before curfew and don't get pregnant? How do I make sure they fill out the college applications and don't post scantily clad pictures online? And there's this myriad of motivations for us. Hopefully it's for their good. Maybe it's for the community. Sometimes it's to avoid embarrassing us, to keep future employment opportunities alive. And so we lean into all kinds of methods. We've all tried rewards and bribes and shame and guilt, authority and pressure. And if none of those work, we lean into the tried and true, because I said so. And a lot of adults, when they're reading through Titus chapter 2, they'll read verse 12. Let's look at it one more time. It says, we are instructed to turn from godless living and sinful pleasures. And you're like, yes, that's what I've been telling them the whole time. That's like the primary theme of my conversations with them. Stop doing that stuff. And we don't know why it doesn't stick and why it doesn't produce any change. It's because we didn't read verse 11. Look at verse 11 that comes right before it. It's the grace of God has been revealed, bringing salvation to all people. If you want to know the one thing that will ever truly change anyone's life, it is the grace of God. Grace is what saves us and changes us. One of the bad behaviors of followers of Jesus is that sometimes we can treat the grace of God as the thing that gets us started, but eventually we'll leave it behind. We'll graduate to other things. We almost treat it like the shallow end of the pool, but eventually I'm going to get to the deep end where there's other things other than grace. And friends, grace is not the shallow end of the pool, it's the entire pool. One pastor said grace is not the ABCs of faith. It's not the toddler version. It is the A to Z. There is not a single part of following Jesus that is not informed by the grace of God. But when we're thinking about changing ourselves, and when we're trying to introduce change into other people's lives, we will often lean into one of two very harmful tactics. We're going to talk about those two and then highlight how the grace of God, how the gospel is totally different. The first thing that we often lean into is this thing called moralism. And the easiest way of understanding it would be truth without grace. This is the try really hard to do the right thing and try really hard not to do the bad thing mentality. And when we try really hard to be good people and obey the rules, one of two things is going to happen if you live your life this way. Either it will lead to self-hatred because you can't get it right long enough to feel good about yourself, or it'll lead to self-righteousness where you think you're better than other people. And isn't it fascinating that both insecurity and pride find its roots in the same spot? Moralism often leads into fear tactics to try to scare us out of doing the wrong thing. I'm of the generation that was in order to discourage us from driving drunk, we were shown pictures of gruesome car accidents to try to scare us out of it. In order to protect us from unprotected or premarital sex, we were shown pictures of STIs to try to gross us out. Even as a kid, I grew up, I got invited to this church one time, right around this point in the calendar, and it looked like they had set up a haunted house at the church. But instead, it was a walk through hell. There were demons that were going to jump out and try to scare you, and a really mean devil at the end that was going to berate you. And it was all about making you more scared of going to hell than it was inspiring you to go to heaven. Fear tactics can maybe scare us into straight behavior for a while, but it never really lasts. And if you wonder if you grew up in an environment like this, maybe you grew up hearing things like, good kids, they don't act like that, and you should know better. And when you make mistakes, it makes me look bad, and God is watching you, so don't screw up. And so often what happens is people that grow up in an environment like this, when they finally have the chance to make their own decisions, they swing the pendulum all the way over to the other end, which is called relativism. And that's grace without truth. That instead of strictly enforcing all the rules, we just erase the rules altogether. Truth becomes relative to where you can decide what's true for you, even if it's not true for me. And it sounds at the beginning very gracious and very loving. Those people may even talk a lot about God's love, but if God's love never cost him anything, then it cheapens it. On top of that, it leads to this really incoherent worldview to where your version of truth and my version of truth, at some point, they might collide. And who wins? And what most people will discover is that you can believe that truth is relative all you want until the moment that you face an injustice, until someone hurts you, and then all of a sudden you believe in some version of absolute truth. God does not say, try really hard to be good, be really aware of the truth without any grace. He also doesn't erase all of the boundaries in our lives so we can do whatever we want, however we please. Instead, the gospel is a different version. The gospel says it is truth and grace. The gospel is the good news of Jesus that says that he lived the perfect life you and I weren't even going to come close to touching. Then he went to the cross in our place to pay the price for our sin we could never afford to pay. He's defeated our ultimate enemy, death, and now is preparing for us a perfect eternity that we could never earn, but he did in our behalf. And that is really good news. But in order for me to be motivated by that, to be motivated by forgiveness, I first have to sit with the weight of my sin. If I don't think that I've been forgiven of all that much, then I won't be all that grateful. But on the other hand, if all I'm aware of is how the sin has corrupted my life and how dark it's gotten, I won't get to experience the joy of forgiveness. Instead, I'll end up on that never-ending treadmill of moral performance. That's why I love the way the Apostle John wrote it in his gospel. He said, "We have seen his glory," that's Jesus, "the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." See, when Jesus showed up, he wasn't 50-50, 50% grace, 50% truth. He didn't have grace days and truth days. Instead, he was full of grace and full of truth. He was 100% both. And following him is going to be the only thing that ever changes us. So with our remaining time, I want to throw out a couple different scenarios that all of us have experienced and talk about how these three ways of living change our response. Let's talk about disappointment. I'm talking about that moment where you messed up and you let people down. You might have even hurt people in the process. How do you respond? Well, if you're living over here in the moralism world, the response right here is that you broke the rules, now you need to repent. You need to try harder to be a better person. If you were a better person, you wouldn't have done that. And it's way more concerned with behavior modification on the outside than inward heart change. Just look like you're a better person. Now, if you're living over here on the other side with relativism, it just says love and accept yourself. You don't ever need to feel bad. You don't ever need to feel guilty. In fact, if a rule made you feel that way, just change the way you feel about the rule. You can erase that because it's way more about being true to yourself. But the gospel has a totally different message. It digs a little bit deeper and it says, something in my life has become too important. In those nights where I can't even sleep because I feel so bad about myself, something has become too important. Somewhere along the way, I have elevated the affection of other people and their affirmation to the highest goal in my life. And if I can put God back on the throne, his voice tells me who I am. What about the topic of sexuality? Well, if you're living over here and try really hard to be a good person, honestly, what will end up happening is that it'll be described as dirty or dangerous. In an effort to avoid negative consequences, either physical or reputational, we end up putting a light on sexuality that makes it gross and scary and develops a very distorted view of this good gift that God gave his creation. But then if you swing the pendulum all the way over here to the other side, the primary message is it's just simply a biological or physical appetite. It's just what we do as animals. There really aren't any consequences, and so we strip every emotional and connective piece from it. But the gospel here, it actually says that sex is a gift within marriage. That sex was actually a good gift that the Creator gave his creation because he wanted you to enjoy life. It was a good thing. And on top of that, it's a symbol that represents the way Jesus gave of himself. And Jesus didn't give of himself a little bit or for one night only. It was a total commitment. And so when we start treating sex as a toy or a tool, we will experience pain. It may not be immediate, but it will be eventual. And sex can only happen in a totally committed and permanent relationship of marriage. Let's give one more. What about the experience of self-control? And I'm talking about that daily or hourly thing that all of us experience where what we want to do, we know that God has said it's out of bounds. We want to gossip about that friend that's no longer around. And we want to cut corners at work to just put in the minimum and still get paid. And we want to find affection in the arms of someone that's other than our spouse because honestly, it's been really hard lately. How do we respond in that moment? Well, if you're living over here in all truth without any grace, the primary message is control your passions for fear of punishment. It's way more about being scared of getting caught than it is pursuing the healthy thing. I don't gossip because what if she finds out? And I don't cut corners because what if I get fired? And I don't have an affair because it'll implode my family instead of having a desire for something that's good. Swing the pendulum all the way over to the other extreme when it comes to self-control. The primary message is find out what's right for you by self-expression. Those desires, you will find someone online that will tell you that every desire of yours is good. And you should pursue it indiscriminately. And to deny any of your desires would not be true to yourself. But the gospel comes along and says, pursue what is good and reject what is evil. When I am changed by grace, I don't live a life of self-control because I'm afraid of getting caught. And I don't live a life without any boundaries whatsoever. Instead, I trust that God's a really good dad. And he gave his kids boundaries, not so that we would live a small life, but so that we would live life to the full. And if God sent his son to the cross in my place, then I can trust him. Friends, this message and this training on how to see everything in our world through the lens of the gospel, it's not just for our kids and students, it's for every single one of us. That all of us have tried really hard to be good. And when that didn't work, we said, maybe there's no such thing as good. I should do what I want. And Jesus provides a better way. It's the way of grace. Jesus was really kind and he gave us this gift. It's a symbol that reminds us of what it took for us to have his grace. It's a thing called communion. And there's bread and juice that represents Jesus' body and blood. And when we take it, it reminds us that grace is not just the thing that saves us, but it's the thing that sustains us and changes us and forms us into who God always wanted us to be. Now, if you didn't grab communion on the way in and you'd like to participate, all you got to do is raise your hand, and one of our volunteers would love to bring you what you need. If you're new to all this, and that was a lot, maybe drinking out of a fire hose, I hope you'll just sit back and reflect on what you've heard today. That you don't have to feel pressure to participate, but I always want to put our cards on the table. Every single week, we pray that today would be the day that God would grab a hold of your imagination and your heart, and you would take one step toward him, and it is a step that I know you will never regret. But for those of us that are followers of Jesus, this is our opportunity to reflect and remember what Jesus has done for us. So you can take communion in your own time.